Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in. I'm Robbie.
I'm Jason.
And welcome to the table. We are so excited to have you guys here. Episode number 22, Jason. We're a Taylor Swift episode. You know,
is that an album? I don't know. I don't actually get that reference. That's pretty sad to say. I don't get that reference.
No. It's a song 22. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 22. Yeah, it's a whole time. You can enjoy it after the episode. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, man. So if for those who watch it on YouTube, you'll see the light's a little different. We're actually filming a little early on a Sunday afternoon. We usually film Tuesday nights. So for me, Robbie has the fancy studio. I'm just in a basement with windows I can't cover. So for those who watch, you're still me, but the lighting's a little different, but everything else is good. Though we'll change within a month and a half or so because Xander has moved out and we're changing the basement to an Airbnb, which means we're going to move the gaming table somewhere upstairs. We're going to figure that out. So you'll be back to having the basement to yourself when you come, Robbie. So it'll be that way, but when you come back for Worlds, so the entire basement will be yours.
Dude, I was the Swanky crew. Some of them are coming up for Worlds. I don't know if they've already started talking to you or not.
They need to. No, they haven't. I figured they would, and I told them when they were here if they came up that I would absolutely have a spot for them to sleep if they need. And they're young kids. They'd be like, "I'll sleep on the floor, Jason. That's all that matters." So like, we're good. We got beds for you. But yeah.
Yeah, I know Reed's a listener, so there's your confirmation, brother. That I realized that might have felt like I was putting you on the spot, Jason. What if he just has this moment where it's like, "Oh, Swanky's coming back"? Yeah, no, they were the worst. I'm getting rid of them. No, we love all of our content creation friends. Yeah, it's going to be exciting. I'm excited to see how the spaces evolve upstairs for you guys.
Yeah, I think we're transitioning our office to the game room. I lose my office, which I really like because our desk, me and Elizabeth have always had side-by-side desks for years and they can look out, but it'll be a better space. I can actually put 6 people at the table at some point because right now I can only do 5 at this table. But also when I have game nights with more than one table, we already have the tables upstairs as opposed to putting that fold up out in the middle that you know about. Now we literally have the kitchen table or our dining room table could be one game table, and then we'll have a game table in the game room. So, that'll be we may knock out the closet that's there to extend that, all kinds of little bitty things. So, but it'll be fun to have an actual game room where I can decorate the walls and kind of put my geek stuff all over the place. So that should be done by the time you get here for sure.
That's so cool. I love I like just looking downstairs as I move some stuff around, got some more games, filled those spaces. And then I was like, I might already need more shelves because based on my last trip up there, I bought 3 games and yeah. Okay, time to keep moving. So
I can tell you there's a good chance I'm going to give you a couple of games when you come. The ones I know you'll like and that just don't get played here. And at worst case, you can pass them along as well. Give them to Ryan or somebody else down there who are gaming friends in Alabama. You'll be more than welcome to pass those along as well. It's like I'm giving I was selling Star Realms just on Facebook, Board Game Exchange, and then Nate messaged me, our good friend Nate messaged me, "Hey, I'll take that one." I was like, "You got it, dude. You don't even got to pay me for it. I'll give you. I will happily pass along my games for free to friends who I know will play it." I was like, "Nate, you got it." Is it just he's working on a Attack on Titan died disc for me. He's got a long line of ones because Nate's dying a lot, but like that'll be the payment is like dying that disc for me. So
that is incredible.
But yeah, when you drive up, you'll probably drive away with a couple of more games if you want them. So I got a couple lined up that I'll happily pass along.
Yeah, that'll be a fun. It's going to be a long trip, but it'll be a fun trip. I'm very, very pumped. So speaking of playing games, games with friends, Jason, what have you been playing lately?
I actually have 3 games listed, but I still haven't decided the second one, so I'll talk about the first one. First one, I actually been texting you a little bit over the last couple of days. It's a game called Western Legends, and as the name says, it's set in the Wild West. That is essentially a sandbox open world game, and that there's no linear path to victory where you're like in Calico, you're laying tiles until a certain point. In Ticket to Ride, you get all the trains out there. Like a lot of games have black and white paths to victory. In Western Legends, I keep looking to my right because it's sitting up here. In Western Legends, you play the role of a cowboy. Some most of them are people like Annie Oakley, Calamity Jane, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday. You're playing them, and it's an action selection game in that you're moving around the board, which is multiple towns, to do stuff. You can go mining for gold. You roll die for that. You can go to a saloon and play poker with everybody else in the town. You can go to a cabaret and just pay money for the show to give you points. You can go rob bandits. You can rob the bank. You can deposit money into the bank. You can rob each other. You can you can go steal cattle and give it to the other. There's 2 places where you can get cattle. You can get cattle, take it to the train to get points, or you can get cattle from one farmer, take it to the other farmer like you're giving away. It's fantastic, right? If you accept the thematics of it. If you enjoy, I'm going to be a cowboy and I'm going to ride my horse to the saloon. I'm going to do this and I'm going to go over here and rob the bank. And if you get into that, Western Legends is amazing, right? It's for the action selection, it's great, but it's very black and white. If you're min-maxing, which Ryder did and swamped me and Elizabeth because he figured out really quick how to win this game, he smoked us. The first game he was like 39 and we were like 11 and 12. It was wild. And that doesn't sound like a lot. It's a lot when you play the game. And the second time we tried to do better and Elizabeth and I did better, but he still smoked us for the min-maxing side of it. Because he just figured out the mechanisms. If I do this, I do this, I do this, I get more money. But the thematics of it are just amazing. It comes with fun little minis. The coolest thing in the entire game of a lot of cool stuff. There's so much stuff to do. It's definitely a heavy game because there's so much you can do. Yeah. All the actions are easy, but there's so many different actions. And I taught it yesterday, and I played New London Longs yesterday. Our disc golfer friends know that. It's 95 degrees. So I was dehydrated yesterday. And at the end of that teach, I'm like, I can't, my mouth would, because I talked so long teaching the game, my mouth was so dry. I literally still have 2 water bottles still sitting here from last night because I had to teach so many things. There was enough stuff in there that it teach a lot. But the coolest thing in there, it has a standard 52 card deck. That 52 card deck is what you use to play poker, but it's also what you use to fight people. Like you play traditional poker, you go in there, the flop happens, you play 2 of your cards. If people are in town, they can ante up. Winnings happen. Traditional poker, right? Or when you go rob somebody or try to rob the bank or arrest somebody, you're doing that as well. You're choosing a card from your hand, a poker card from your hand to play, and whoever has the highest number card wins. Those cards also have, every single one of them have different abilities you can use as a reaction to something that happens. Just as an action. On your turn, you get 3 actions. You can move, take action at different places, or play one of your cards for an action. Like one card is just get $30. So I love dual use cards. Different than Clank and Dune Imperium that I reference the most about dual use cards. But the idea that the cards I'm using to play poker are the cards I'm using to fight people or the cards I'm using to take action, you have to choose which one to use. Again, which is why it's a heavier game. So cool. I know you, for those who know Robbie C, the disc golfer, know that he loves his cowboy hat. So I know this is a game we will absolutely be playing when you come up for sure. Does it sound interesting at all, you Robbie?
Yeah, I will say, and you and I have talked about this game in the past, and it's one of those because we both found it through the same source that was tabletop, and the role play or the getting into it was so essential to the success of that game, and it was Sheriffs of Nottingham.
Yep.
So anytime that I think about a game where the role play or the thematic really shines when everyone gets around to it, how does it compare in that realm? Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Do you have to really lean into it's an open world type vibe to have the most fun?
You will have more fun if you do that. How about that? So, because this is very much a take that game. And if you don't accept the thematics of it, like my lovely wife, she got frustrated because she had 2 games in a row where Ryder was just min-maxing and he was going and robbing from her and robbing from me and doing this and doing that. Because you're playing, or he was arresting. She decided to go on the wild because you can try to go up the good. I'm a good person and be a marshal. I'm a bad person and have I forgot what the term is, but if you have these certain points, my mind's blanking. If you're like a bad person, anyone can arrest you, not just the sheriff. And so then you lose all this stuff. And so it's a take that game. It can be, and it's hard to imagine a version of this not being take that. So I think that the thematics, all the little mechanisms are all great. A bunch of little different mechanics you can do, little different actions, all these spots. I like all those actions, but if you embrace the thematics of it, will help this game come together. And that's what Ryder's like. I won twice, and I don't know if I really like this game. But I was like, if you got to embrace the thematics of it, I said, Robbie's going to come out and play. He goes, well, I'll play with Robbie then. I was like, Robbie. Robbie's going to have us having a great time with this, right? For sure. Yeah. So like when Robbie comes and plays, he will help drive, because we are not thematic gamers.
Yeah.
You will help drive us to a level of theme in that game that'll make it a ton of fun. So, to answer your, for sure. That was a long answer to a short question, but I think the game shines when you embrace the thematics of getting to be a cowboy, good or bad. It shines like that. If you're doing it just for mechanics, it's fine. Like as a mechanics game, it's probably still a chocolate chip cookie just as a mechanics game for a gamer, because there's just so much fun stuff to do, and you can take different paths every time.
Yeah.
The thematics are where it will shine for sure. And it was one that's been out of print for a while, and I lucked into getting a copy of it, a brand new copy too. So I didn't even find a used copy. It was a new copy I got. And they actually just announced they're going to do some expansions on Kickstarter in the fall. Okay. So if the game stays in my collection, I'll definitely be getting the Kickstarter version of it. So, or the Kickstarter expansions as well. So that was Western Legends. It's a long game. Turns are slow because you can do so many things. So we'll play a 4-person game when you come, but it'll be probably a 3-hour game easily, just because it takes you can do so much on your turn, which isn't a bad thing, but now you're just kind of waiting. But sometimes other people around the table are playing that because they may be playing poker. Are you maybe robbing them or fighting them or whatnot? But the game I would say, including the teach, it'll be a 3-hour game with 4 of us, me, you, Elizabeth, and Ryder. So, but it'll still be fun.
Yeah.
The other game I'm going to talk about, I'm going to go with Expeditions. The other game, Nidavellir, we've talked about before, but Nidavellir, I think, will be a Bard's episode one day because it's easy enough to play. Yeah. Expeditions, I actually talked about in our second episode ever. I went to go look to see if I talked about it. And essentially, Expeditions is a follow-up to Scythe. It's a sequel to Scythe, for those who may know Scythe. It's in definitely the family of that, but it's a Stonemaier Games game in which on your turn, you're moving a mech around a board to take actions, essentially, oversimplifying that. And you're playing cards as part of those actions. And so they had an expansion come out recently from Stonemaier Games. So they said helped improve the game. One of the biggest complaints about the game was that it takes a long time to get going, because it's like an engine building game. You're still playing cards for the engine, but then you like reset that engine and replay those cards out. It just took a while to get resources to get the game going. But now you start with you always had a unique ability for your mech, but now your mech also has some resources attached to it as well. And you had these cool, when you played a card, if you had the same color mini that was required for that card, you could play the card and take the action. But then if you had a mini that matched the color required for that card, you now get to do a bonus action. But now you start with a wild mini, for lack of a better term, that counts for every color. So now you always have the option to have a card to play that you could activate that card. The fun thing about Expeditions is it has a fun action selection system in that there's 3 actions you can take. You can move, gather, or play a card. Move the mech around the board, gather resources printed on the card, on the tile you go to, not card, or play a card from your hand. And what's cool is, this is one we'll definitely show you for sure, the first action of the game, you have all 3 options, because on your player board, you have 3 little indented things. One says gather, play, and move. And you have a little cube to show what you're going to play. So your very first move goes into a spot that you can do all 3. Then the rest of the time, you have to cover up one of those 3 actions. So I cover up play, which means I can move and gather. I cover up move, which means I can gather and play. So cool. I love unique action selection for that. And at some point, you reset, revive, something like that, refresh, in which all the cards you've played to the right side of your play board come to the left side. The left side is essentially your hand. It's just always face up. So you always know the cards everybody has. And then when you play to the right side, that's your played row, your action row, your card row. Just that action selection is what I love, because, okay, I got to think, we'll get to all 3. And then I got to cover, move, and now I'm play and gather. You can do it in any order you want. Then I'm going to move this over here. Now I can move and play. So it forces you to do each successive turn is slightly different actions, which I love that concept. Not too different than, you can't do the action twice in a row. So not too different than Villainous, truly, because in Villainous, you have to move somewhere else, take action. Totally. Scythe has a version of that because you have to go a different spot on your player board. So It's super cool. The mechs are amazing. The art's amazing. It's from the Scythe world. It still is. It's a slower game because it just takes time to move around and get your resources going because you can't land where someone else is. And so it shines its best at 3 players. Not super hard because you're literally just moving somewhere and doing something. But as you get more cards, you're trying to math out, okay, if I play this card on this turn and my next time I play this card, but this card lets me play another card. So it gets in that heavier level. But that's Expeditions. Beautiful art, fun gameplay. I play sometimes, I love it. I play sometimes, I'm like, okay, it was okay. But I like the fact they did an expansion to help speed the game along a little bit. So it's if for those who've ever played Scythe and it's not playing Scythe, but it's in the same world, and if you like the art and the mechs and all that, it's a great sequel to that.
Yeah. And didn't you say that it's not like a completely expedited process? Like it's not like it plays like half the time.
No, it's still right. Because it's in the same world. And it has similar vibes, but there's because you're still getting hearts to complete something. And I forgot they use the term for hearts. But yeah, it's a sequel, but that's a different gameplay altogether, but it looks same artwork and everything else. So
yeah.
What have you been playing, Robbie?
Well, we've been playing some lighter stuff. My wife, getting her to play some games is an interesting process. So we had a small get together with a friend and 2 friends. And so we played Exploding Kittens, which is, I hesitate to call it a classic, but it is certainly a game that many people are. Catan for the long time, if you talked about getting into the hobby gaming world, Catan was like the answer. I feel like Exploding Kittens is becoming like another highway to get to the same place, if that feels accurate. Exploding Kittens is the best way I can describe Exploding Kittens is a push your luck card game where you are drawing cards that have different abilities, different things. And for every player, there's a deck of cards that we're all drawing from, and there is a bomb inside of that deck, and you are drawing until someone draws the bomb. The positives, every player starts with a diffuse card, and that diffuse card, quite simply, lets you then take that bomb and put it somewhere in the deck. You don't get to like look through the deck and decide where you want to put it, but you could count like, okay, if me, Jason, Elizabeth, and Lindsay are playing and I blow up, okay, I can diffuse it and then I can take that card, that bomb, and I can say Lindsay's next to me, Jason's second, and then Elizabeth. So I can count 1 card off the top, put the bomb right there face down, and then reset the deck. So then Lindsay would draw her card in peace, and boom, I'm trying to get Jason to blow up. Right. But Jason might suspect that I'm trying to get Jason to blow up, so he's trying to move around. So it's a very, very light, fun party game. Right. I would definitely put it in the realm of party. It plays a decent amount of people, and it's a game that, very similar to Bang, I feel like some crowds you can play this game with, and it's really, really fun. And then other times you're going to play this game and you're going to blow up like immediately, lose your diffuse. You're going to get targeted and you're just going to spectate everybody playing the game for a significant amount of time. But super light, super fun. It was definitely one that like I knew we were recording an episode, and so I wanted to go ahead and make sure we got a game in, and we had different people. So we just threw a game of Exploding Kittens on, which was stress-free. You got to have the stress-free games. Yeah. Have you played Exploding Kittens?
I've never played any of those. Cards Against Humanity, Exploding Kittens, Taco Cat, Goat Cheese, any of those games. Unsurprisingly, I've never played any of those games because they don't appeal to me. The question I have, and I know why they appeal to a larger audience. Let's be clear. Like, I'm not bashing those games by any way, but they're just not ones I would choose. How would that play on the banter? Would it go too long, or would we just have to call? Because I'm thinking of more games we can play on the banter. For those who don't know, Robbie and I get to participate in this other live stream on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. on FoundationDisc.com, not Foundation Disc, Foundation YouTube.
Yeah.
And that where we play That's Not a Hat on It, and it was a massive hit. Like I literally just ordered That's Not a Hat. So we have that play on the banter every couple of months. The way you described it, other than the last thing saying it could be extended gameplay, the gameplay sounds interesting because it's push your luck and you may explode real time, right? That sounds like it could be for a 5 or 10 minute game segment on the banter. What do you think about how it would play?
Yeah, so I think it would play pretty well. You start with a certain hand size. And so that hand size is kind of like tools to defend yourself. So you have like a play this card and it lets you because you can just straight up draw. And if you draw, that is your turn. Like basically your turn ends when you have drawn.
Okay.
If that makes any sense. So because you're always going to get another card, but you can play as many cards as you want in order to avoid that. So you can play a card that lets you look at the top 3 cards of the deck. You can play another card that lets you look at the top 3 cards of the deck and rearrange them. You can play a card that lets you draw from the bottom of the deck. You can play a card like there's just a host of cards you can play. So because you're going to just draw, the way that I would speed it up is it would almost imbalance the game. But I would take, especially with how many people you have, is if you cut the deck size in half and started everyone with less cards, you'd have less ways to defend yourself. And so people would be blowing up. Because one of the big things is everybody starts their hand with a diffuse.
Okay.
And you can spend like 7 cards in the actual game. You can like spend 7 cards to take a card from the discard pile. Like, so you could, in theory, discard basically your whole hand to get a diffuse from the discard pile and then draw. But also people can nope, and there's cancellations and things like that. So there's just certain cards you could take out that I think would make the gameplay go quicker, which would alleviate that house rule kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And like we talked about in our last episode, for those who haven't listened, we are all for house rules, especially when it's situational like that. Because I'm looking for other games that could play in 5 to 10 minutes, but that can be upbeat, right? You know how it is. Like we need energy when we're doing that on the banter. And I've never played Exploding Kittens. And so that could be a possibility for sure. So
Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza is another one that would do really well.
That's the one
if they had the right like camera angle to where you could see it.
Yeah.
Because that one's audible as well.
Yeah, so that's where, like, if we get to that point where we can quickly, whether it's Silas's phone or whatever, or quickly do it but it's still stationary, that's the issue. So, cool. All right, man. What's your second game you played?
And the second game we played is one that I won't talk too much about because realistically, we played it in preparation for the game that we're going to play today. Because I do not own today's game. Jason and I are actually in the middle of a game of it on BGA, but it's called Blockus is the game that I played, not today's game, but Blockus is I would say a classic game, but it's a much more classic board game than like a Monopoly or things of that sort. I would put it in the same big box store retail. You can find it on Amazon. You can find it at Walmart, things like that. And it's definitely been redone. But the idea of Blockus is that the board is a grid. It's a blank grid. And everyone has 21 polyomino shapes that are one of 4 different colors. Plays up to 4. You've got red, green, blue, and yellow. And so everyone starts in a corner, and you start laying your polyomino pieces. And polyomino is going to be an important word because we're going to use it a lot this episode. But for those unfamiliar, you think like a domino has 2 sides to it, like 2 squares put together. Polyomino are these squares, but they can be much larger, much smaller type deal. So in Blockus, you have a 1 polyomino square, and then you have a 2 polyomino square, and then you have a 3. And there's multiple versions of the 3 polyomino square. And then you have 4 and 5. And I think it may go up to 6, but essentially you have 21 unique shapes is what you're looking at. And you are playing those polyomino pieces, and everyone's playing their pieces on the board. The trick is that you can only connect your color via corners. So as you're laying these shapes down, you end up with, I have this like 5 squares in a row piece that I lay down. And Lindsay plays her 5 square piece right next to it. Now it looks like they're butted up at the ends, but then I can play like a 1, 2, like 2 in a row, and then 3 straight down. I can cap off that top side of hers because it connects corners to mine. And now one of her corners is blocked. But you're building this board together, and there's little holes that you end up finding through the corners touching that makes this really beautiful. It made me fall in love with polyomino games, if I'm being honest. And the 2-player version is something that's always been interesting because you actually play 2 of the color. All 4 colors are still there, but both of you play 2 of the colors, and your total score of leftover squares that don't get played to the board is what matters. So super, super fun. Blockus is one that we can kind of turn our brains off and just play. We don't have to really even talk. We don't have to share the rules. Everyone knows the rules at our house. The only questionable part about when we play it upstairs is that they're, like see-through little plastic squares. So you're like counting them 3 times before you put them in bags to be like, okay, do I have all the pieces? Because to replace 1 block of squares is like $5, even though the game's like $20. So if you lose 2 squares, you might as well just buy a whole other set, and like now we have backups for everything. But so Blockus. Have you ever played Blockus, Jason?
We used to, so yes, we had it for us and the kids. I was even looking around to see if we still have it. I don't think we have it anymore. It's one of those weird games that it comes in and out of print at weird times, and I was able to sell it a while back. But so I listened to you like, yeah, okay, I remember that. If you'd asked me how to play it beforehand, I'd be like, I have no idea. But we got it because when we first got into gaming years ago, and we're trying to find good games for kids, Blockus is one of them for sure. Jamie Stegmeyer still loves it. It's one of his favorite polyomino games to this day because of the nature of it. So and the tactile nature of those cool looking pieces are just really fun. It gets in even in my world of snobby game reviewers, people acknowledge that it gets put into the big box store game category too much when it's much more of a gamer's game. But because it's been sold in Target and Walmart and all these places for so long, people are like, oh, that's just a whatever game. That's a Walmart game. Well, not really. It's actually a gamer's game. But because those pieces kind of look like toyish in the best way possible, because it's such good production, $5 a piece, you think, oh, it's like a toy, and it's not really a game. So we have played it. I didn't remember at all how to play it, but we had it for a long time, and it's a good game. Good game too to lead in talking about today's game.
Yeah. So Jason, why don't you show us talk about today's game, which is Patchwork.
No problem, man. So Patchwork, like Robbie said, with Blockus, is a polyomino game in which you're putting pieces together on your board. Think Tetris style. If you're a puzzler, if you're from a puzzle background, or specifically a Tetris puzzle background, this is your game all the way because you're doing the best way to do that. In Tetris, you have 4 or 5 unique pieces of the same ones. In Patchwork, you have a wide variety of them. So released in 2014, so it's been out for a while. It was designed by Uwe. It's pronounced, what's funny is it's Uwe Rosenberg, but you'll hear Uwe, and U. Like I've heard reviewers say, I've heard all 3 things. Designed by Uwe. I hear Uwe more than anything else, so that's what I'm going to say. Designed by Uwe Rosenberg, published by Lookout Games. It's actually 124 on Board Game Geek. So let me step back this. I don't think we've talked about this yet. This is actually our first 2-player only game that's been a featured game on Bards. So this is a 2-player only game. Probably people have done variations to have multiple players. This game is designed for 2 players only. So I will say that. But the point of the fact that it's been out for 8 years, it's a polyomino game for only 2 players, and it's 124 on Board Game Geek. For those in the game world, that you're like, wow, this is a really good game, or gets really great reviews is a better statement than that, right? Plays in about 20 to 30 minutes. If you're a hardcore polyomino gamer, you can play this in 10, 15 minutes easily. Or if you want to take your time and think around it, maybe 20 to 30 minutes. The 20 to 30 minutes is what's advertised in the box, but you could easily sit down. Like is one of my jokes about these kind of games. It almost takes longer to set this one up And I mean that tongue in cheek, because the way you have to spread all the pieces out randomly than it does to play, because it goes so quick. I'm going to get this piece, put it down, get this piece, put it down. So in Patchwork, 2 players complete to build the most aesthetic and high scoring patchwork quilt on their personal 9x9 game board. When we say 9x9, essentially 9 squares by 9 squares board that you're fitting your polyomino pieces on. On a player's turn, you have 2 options. You can either purchase a patch from the board, or you can pass. When you purchase a patch, you pay buttons, which are the economy in this game is buttons. You each start with a certain amount of buttons. You pay the buttons on the cost of that patch. So what's unique about this setup is that you randomly, there's, 30 or 40 or 50 total polyomino pieces in a bunch of different shapes. You randomly put them in a big circle. And then there's one specific piece that it's the 1x2. It's 2 long and 1 square by 2 squares length. You put in the main game a thimble, I think it is. I have the Christmas version of it, which we'll talk about. By that, and now you're moving clockwise. Your selection opportunities are the next 3 tiles from that piece, from that thimble, from that Christmas tree. So one of those next 3 pieces, you can buy one of those, puzzle pieces, one of those polyomino pieces. On that polyomino piece, it'll show a cost in buttons anywhere from 0 to 10, as well as a time, a little hourglass. That's how far you'll move on the time board. So if you can afford a piece, you buy a piece for that many puzzle pieces. You move that much on the time board, and the time board's also just a square. Think of a scoring track that just goes around and round and around. You're just moving that many spots up your scoring track. You're not scoring real time, but that's the concept of it. You're moving your piece up the scoring track. They call it a time track in the game, so we'll kind of continue to do that. Buy that polyomino piece, put it anywhere in your board. The only rules are it can't overlap another polyomino piece, and it can't hang off the board. It doesn't have to be built adjacent, though that's probably in your best interest. You could build them at 2 different squares if you wanted to. But the idea is that you are trying to completely fill up your board. Is your ultimate goal is to completely fill up your board. So you buy that piece, put it anywhere on your board, move the number of spaces equal to what's on that hourglass thing. 1 button, three movements. If after you've played your piece and moved, you're still behind your opponent, or if your piece is on top of your opponent, you go again. That's one of the coolest things, and I'm sure we'll go deeper in this game, but the fact that you could possibly go 2 or 3 times in a row if the game works out that way. So if you are behind, if your piece is equal with your opponent and you're the one on top, or you're still behind, you go again. You can buy another patchwork piece, another polyomino piece if you have enough buttons, or you can do what's called passing. Passing means the number of spots you go to pass your opponent. So say I'm 2 spots behind my opponent. I'm going to move 4 spots. 1, 2, 3, 4. Cause I'm going to go 1, 2, my opponent's 3, and the next spot's 4. I'm going to gain 4 buttons for that. So that's how you can gain economy. One way to gain economy is if you pass, the number of spots your piece moves is how many buttons you get. Buttons are your economy again. So that's what passing is. Instead of purchasing a patch, you can pass. Also, if you can afford a patch, you don't have to buy that patch. Again, some more strategy we can talk later, but those are your 2 options for the game. As you move around the scoring board, on that board, you will also pass just buttons that are printed on the board. So when I referenced before, I didn't say this, but some of the polyomino pieces you buy will have pictures of buttons on them. And then when you pass the buttons on the time track, you then actually get more economy. You get the number of buttons that are actually sitting on your board. The number of buttons that are on your pieces are there. Probably not explain that well because it's much more visual related, but there are ways based on the pieces you put on the board. As you move around the time track, you're going to generate an economy to get more buttons. Excuse me. Like I said before, my mouth is already dry because I'm talking too much. You get your button economy, and then now you have the buttons when you pass that, and then it becomes the other player's turn. If you're now in front of the other person, they still go. One small thing we'll highlight too, on that time track, there's 4 or 5 times you will pass a little bitty patch, and when you pass that patch, it's a single piece that you can take and immediately put on your board. It's just the only time you can get a 1x1, i.e. a single square piece, is by crossing that place on the time track. And I think there's 5 on the board. You have to play those immediately.
And it's the first person to cross that.
The first person to cross that gets that. Once you get essentially to the center of the timing board, the center of your timing track, the center of your scoring board, you'll do one more button economy. You earn all the buttons you can from that. Once the second person does, they earn all their economy and they add up their buttons from that. They add up their total number of buttons. Every empty square still on your board is -2 points. So this game can end in negative points. If you don't have enough buttons to counteract that, it can end in negative points. And there's one minor bonus that whenever the first person to basically completely fill in 7x7 of their 9x9 board just gets a single bonus of 7 buttons for some more economy for that game. Once everybody has gone to the central square of the time track, you add up all the buttons, subtracting buttons for those empty spaces. Whoever has the most points at the end of the game wins.
And that's Patchwork.
That's Patchwork.
It's interesting trying to describe a polyomino game in podcast form because this game, honestly, at its core, is very, very straightforward. Like, There's a track that you're moving around, and on your turn, there are 3 pieces available to you based on this giant wheel of pieces that are out there. And if you can afford them, great. If you can't, then you move forward and you pass. So you're trying to acquire and fill the board, which is, I feel like every polyomino game, that's the goal. It wouldn't be a polyomino game if there wasn't some form of, I have a blank canvas and I'm trying to Tetris these pieces onto the board. Patchwork adds in a couple other elements with those polyomino pieces. Some of them have buttons. I would say confidently, I feel like half of them don't have buttons.
Possibly.
How do you feel about that ratio?
I know the other versions. We're talking about the other versions, right? They are you talking about? We're talking about just polyomino games, right?
Just the pieces inside of Patchwork, like that you're adding to the board. I don't know how many of them have like actual buttons on them.
Yeah, there's a large, as I've learned from my games with Elizabeth lately, there's a large number of them that don't have buttons. So.
Yeah, so you're trying to recruit in and draw in these pieces, and so you're paying attention to really while you're selecting pieces. There's 4 factors in choosing your pieces, which is kind of unique to a lot of polyomino games in that you're trying to, how does this fit onto my board / how many spaces does it fill up? How much does it cost for me to buy this piece? Because you're spending victory points to acquire those pieces to go on. And sure, the ratios from what I've been like trying to see, the ratios do try to balance themselves in terms of like this piece covers 4 or 5 squares and it costs 7 buttons for you to buy. Okay, well, if I didn't cover those 4 or 5 squares, I would be losing 8 to 10 points at the end of the game. So it's like a net positive of 3 for the min-maxers out there. So you're paying attention to that. You're also paying attention to the time. How much is it going to move me up the time track? Like, is that valuable? And then 4th, where is this going to position the spool for the next player? And are they going to get a piece that's like super low, like great value for the econ? It definitely is a game that, like, you've played it more than I have, Jason. Is this one that you feel like you kind of have to pay attention to what the other person's doing a little bit, or you just kind of vibe on your own?
I truly think you vibe on your own on this one, unless you're kind of racing for the 7x7. The only time I really pay attention, especially later in the game, I pay attention a little bit more to if I go here, now that next piece is 3 away for Elizabeth to take. But if I can go to that one now, usually if you're only going to take one action, usually can't affect the other person's action unless you're going past something they wanted. But that's early in the game. I don't pay attention at all to that because early in the game, I didn't pay attention at all. And some people complain the game plays itself, but I disagree because, like, I can only afford this. I'm going to buy this. I'm going to put this here. Well, that's not necessarily true. There are nuances to which ones you want to put, how you want to build it. Elizabeth literally started building right from the middle, which I'd never seen before. By default, you think, I'm going to build from the edge because that's the perfect thing. When you build from the middle, you actually have a lot more open flexibility to go around it. Now you're pushing your luck with it. But my mind works, okay, it's a polyomino game. I'm trying to fill it in. Well, that means I need to go to that square corner perfectly and just go up from there. So I to go back to your question, the times I've played it, except at the very end, I was not looking, or if they were close to 7x7 or the very end, I hardly paid attention to what the other person was doing at all. Because I didn't want to get distracted with overthinking, really. Because I would start overthinking. If I'm like, well, if I get that one, she could do that. But if I do this, okay, I don't want to do that. I want to have fun playing the game, which means I want to get a piece, put on there, and see how cool I can make this.
Yeah, for sure. So, Jason, what are some of your some highlights for this when it comes to this game for you?
We've mentioned a couple of them for sure, that it's, if you like puzzle pieces or Tetramino, Tetris style stuff, you're going to love this, because that's all this game is. Super simple gameplay, as Robbie very, very surmised from my long convoluted thing. You take a piece or you pass. That's it. The entire game is I take a piece and play my stuff and put it, or I pass and move my button and move my scoring token. That's it. What I like about this game is that, even going to Robbie's question about do I pay attention to what my opponent does? Not really, but it's a no luck game, in that everything's out there. Every single piece that is going to be put on a board, or can be put on a board, is already in one big circle. So you literally can see everything. You see your opponent's board the whole time. You see the time tracks. You can see where they're moving. So there is no luck in this game, or there's almost no luck. The only luck is the randomness at which the tiles come out, which we all have to deal with that, and the starting player, right? It may turn out perfectly that the random starting player has a perfect startup, but that's so early in the game, it's unlikely that that's the case. That randomization of the kick up at the start of the game makes it great, in that it's perfect information. I can see everything at all the times, and I just have to see which one do I want to take, which tile do I want to take and put in there for sure. I like the fact that there's lots of strategy because of the way the different tiles are in your order, but it's not, okay, what is this card that turns over? Okay, it does this. What is this card I just draw going to do? Now, I like those kinds of luck games as well, but I like, okay, we're just going to try to see how we can outthink each other putting this puzzle piece on there. What about you?
Yeah.
Anything? What are some of your highlights you like about it?
Yeah, something that's very unique about this is that I feel like polyomino games, the ones that I've played the most, are you end up with either your own pool of polyomino pieces like Blockus, where we all have the same pool, just the order in which we put those out can vary player to player. So there is if you find out that someone's really good at that game, you can just copy them the whole time, like to a certain point, and then you kind of have to expand. So that's unique. But then I also think of a cartographers, where everyone's getting polyomino pieces that they're trying to put on the board. But if memory serves me correct, on cartographers, we're putting the same polyomino piece on our board. So you're kind of building appropriately, like how you build it. We all are going to end up with the same challenge, which is pretty unique. For this one, I love that the pieces are unique all across and around the table. And when I take that 2 button, like it has 2 buttons printed on there and it costs me 6 to grab it, I'm the only one that's going to have that. Like Jason's not going to get a copy of that. And therefore, like, that is a unique addition to my board. So how you can attack it could very much, like, you could probably build, if you played this game a lot, you could build a very particular strategy of knowing, like, these are the highest econ pieces on the board. So when one of them comes up, like, if I can see one coming up, I need to go ahead and prepare and prep because I know that's a high value piece. So what I agree with Jason that, like, that's the only luck side of it, is how they all get spread out to start. It's a fascinating picture to see every possible piece out in front of you and then being like, okay, I got to wait for the wheel to come around or come back to this and hope that, oh, that piece is going to slot in really well. So that's super unique. The time track is also one that I'll let you kind of start on, the time track and the whole jumping thing, because it is a pretty unique feature in itself.
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple of games that have this mechanism, and the Dice Tower guys call it the ratchet mechanism, that you can go as far as, well, It's not the same thing. So similar concept that whoever is behind is the next person to go. The last person in the order is the next person to always go. Takedo, Elizabeth doesn't like Takedo. Takedo's this game. Takedo go all with 5 players, but if you're the last guy and you can make the moves legally, you can keep making moves. So similar to here, if you're 5 spots ahead of me on the time track and I have enough buttons based on the polyomino pieces around the board, around the circle, I can take one, place it, move, take one, place it, move, as long as I'm still not passing you yet. I think it's awesome. I love the idea of that. And that if that right turn hits and I got 10 buttons in a while, there's a one that costs 3 with 2 movement. There's one that costs 1 with 4 movement. There's one that costs 1 with 3 movement. I just moved 10 spots. It's still my turn again. I played 3 patches and I get to go again, right? I love that mechanism for sure. It can be brutal if you're on the opposite end of that, but it's possibly because you just spent a couple of your own big patches to move a lot, or you took a patch that cost you a bunch of movement and you just accepted the loss of, or the risk of that thing because that patch has 3 buttons. So for the rest of the game, you're getting 3 buttons every time you generate buttons. I like that you have those options to do that. And similarly, you just don't have to. If you just want to get a bunch of buttons, if Robbie's 5 spaces in front of me and I just want to get a bunch of buttons for a later move, I can just choose to move that entire way past Robbie. And if I happen to cross the button on the board, I will get all those button pieces from movement. And if I cross a button, I also get all the buttons from my board. I think that's what happened and when Robbie and I played, I had a great button economy going early and I was just getting a ton of buttons, which lets me buy big things. And the last time I moved, I had to go like 4 or 5 spots into the end. So I had buttons, got all those buttons, and then generated the economy. I like the idea that you have that flexibility and freedom for that.
Yeah. It definitely has a lot of, I would agree in that the strategy, because there are multiple mechanisms built into the game, when it plays as intended, there is a lot of strategic options available. The random, that is probably where the random luck of the pieces laying out can really make this feel kind of bad. As a great example, Jason and I are playing one on BGA right now, Board Game Arena, digitally. And so on BGA, we had a turn where Jason had hopped me. So it was my turn to go. And I looked at the pieces that were in front of me, and all of the pieces that were in front of me were all like a minimum of 7 buttons to buy. And so it was like, okay, I only have the option to pass here. Yeah. But when I pass, I'm only going to get 2 buttons because I'm just barely going to pass. And if Jason does the same thing, we're kind of just waiting each other out on who's going to buy the big pieces, because not one of the 3 of them are good pieces. Like in terms of they're going to cost a lot of buttons and they're going to cover a lot, but it doesn't have buttons on there. I wish, if I were modifying the game, I wish that when you passed, it moved the spool as well.
Yeah.
Just so that we don't end up in a gridlock of, well, someone's got to make the move. And so that's why I say when it plays out to how it's supposed to, there's that beautiful, oh, I can grab a little piece here. Okay. Because that's something when we played, when I was up there, is I wanted to make sure Jason and I were both pushing for that 7x7 grid. So I used the time track as most effectively as I could. And I grabbed all but one of the 1x1 tiles during the game to cover all these extra spaces, thinking I'm crushing this game. Like, I'm doing really well. I'm filling in my board. I'm doing all of that. So I thought I utilized the time track effectively, not necessarily paying attention to the overall track or like the track around the edge.
Yep. Yep.
So Jason, talk to you. You have the Christmas version. This is, I think, a nice benefit to this game is that, like, thematically, if you love this game, you can kind of take it in a bunch of different ways.
Yep. There's the basic version, which is the theme is you're making a quilt, right? It's called Patchwork. You're doing patches and you're completing the game with a quilt, which is, from a design perspective, it's very cute and very nice artwork for sure. The buttons are clean. Everything's clean about it. The boards are sturdy from production value for this small box 2-player game. It's not bad at all. The Christmas version is the one I have. All the pieces of instead of being things of a quilt, they're all presents and they're wrapped presents. I'm a Christmas guy. I love it. It came with what's funny is it came with a cookie ornament of like a polyomino piece because Robbie was pointing out how the top of my box has a hole in it. And it was like a no kidding aluminum cookie ornament that busted the box top. It's like, I don't know where that thing is. And like a week or two after Robbie left, I found it just randomly. I was like, hey, I found the cookie ornament. It was kind of funny. So, but the production of it's really good. There's other versions as well. There's a Halloween version where I think instead of buttons, it's eyeballs, which sounds kind of cool and thematic. There's an Americana, an Americana version, and there's also a Valentine's Day version. And there's also a Patchwork Express, a Patchwork Doodle, some other versions of Patchwork that are out there as well. And so, one of the things I like about it, to your point there, that it's rare that can happen, but you're right. You have to acknowledge that there's a time where you have to two buttons. Okay, now I can buy it. Love the idea about a house rule or a real updated rule, but at least a house rule, move it one spot. Every time you have to do a pure pass, right? I can't afford this pass and I'm just jumping over you essentially and getting those 2 buttons, make a house rule where you move it one. We may do that as well. The good thing is the game plays so fast that if you have one of those bad gaming experiences, the very next time you can play it, and you'll probably have a better gaming experience for sure. Because that's your point. It's the odds of that happening often are not really highly there for sure. So one other thing I'll highlight when I think about it, because it was so unique about board game design and board games in general, is that you can have someone like Uwe Rosenberg design Patchwork, which, like Robbie said, it's hard in a podcast verbal form. I explained rules in a very detailed way that makes it sound very complicated. It's not complicated at all. Pick a piece, pay for it, put it. Pick a piece, pay for it, fit it. So the complications is just the puzzle side of it. But the gameplay is so super streamlined. But the same person who designed the super streamlined game designs a game called Agricola that I love that has 14 worker placement spots and super crunchy stuff and a bunch of occupations you can play and a bunch of improvements you can do, and they're just like super heavy games. Uwe is known for super heavy games like Agricola, like Caverna, Feast for Odin, Le Havre, a bunch of different games that are definitely heavyweight and all like top 100 BGG. That's how popular those games are. But then he also is known for a game called Bonanza, which is a deck building game or something about beans, which is really old that everybody seems to love. But he's known for Patchwork, all the variations of Patchwork. He's known for polyominoes in general. He has a whole line of polyomino games, but New York Zoo as well. The game that we played, and that you recently bought is a Uwe Rosenberg game. Totally different kind of game, in that the moment you complete your board, it's full, right? As opposed to you're doing points at the end. And the way you select it with the animals and all that. But I think it's very fun and cool to think about people who design these super heavy, crunchy games are also the same guys that design these super streamlined games. And I always come back to this. It totally left field tangent, but I was an art history minor in college, right? So I'm fascinated by artists. People will look at Picasso and think his art stinks. But I promise you, Picasso could sit down and in his lifetime draw a picture perfect recreation of my face. And you'd be like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Because his skill set where he expressed himself was in his type of painting, right? Jackson Pollock the same way. Jackson Pollock was a fantastic artist, could sit down and probably recreate anything by hand by looking at it. But that's not how he expressed himself, right? I love the fact that folks who can do super streamline, that is like, oh, that's so great, can go like, oh, Feast for Odin's a beast. Like, I love Feast for Odin, but like has 84 worker placement spots and it has a polyomino game at the same time. And it's all these things. I'm always impressed that the same mind comes up with both of those types of games. And I love the fact that Uwe is out there developing those two types of games.
Yeah. Now, something that I want to come back to that we talked about early, and like, I feel like we went over it really fast. This is a 2-player game. We have talked about several games that can be played at 2 players, but it is strictly a 2-player game. And I feel like when you find games that are built for a 2-player count, they really do, at least in my experience, fall on one of two sides of the coin. They are either extremely simple because they're designed almost for this. You have friends or couples or whatever that are gamers, and what if we just want to play a quick game after dinner? Patchwork, especially if you're both polyomino lovers, fits this slot perfectly. Like, it is there's a very real chance, if Elizabeth also loved polyomino games, like, you guys could set Patchwork up just in the dining room and like, oh, we're just sitting here chatting about our day. We can set this up and honestly play while we're discussing the rest of our day. Like, that is so straightforward, and I love that. And then you have other sides of 2-player games which take you down the super complicated road, and it's like, we want it to be crunchy, but we want this dueling aspect. I love that lots of 2-player games also have, even if they aren't explicitly take that, there is a take that vibe because I'm blocking you from doing this. I'm taking this one and I'm blocking you from doing this. This one, I agree with Jason that you can truly just kind of ignore what the other person's doing. They still are going to affect what you're doing. So it's not like you're playing necessarily single player solitaire, but it's a very simple and not cutthroat 2-player game, which is so rare to find.
Yeah, I totally agree that the analogy there was good, thinking about, and I even started looking at quickly going through the top 100 to see what the highest 2-player game is. For those in the gaming world will know it's Seven Wonders Duel, because Seven Wonders Duel is higher rated than Seven Wonders. People love Seven Wonders Duel. So if you come from a Seven Wonders life and go play the duel game, it is amazing, but it has a ton of stuff going on. It's not a casual game. You are dead serious. You literally could just have a plate here. Oh, it's my turn. I'll get this piece put here and talk about your day and eat and just kind of play the game. That's very much the way Patchwork, and I think it's meant to be that way. I'm sure Uwe designed it as that lightweight. Now you can, as you play more and fill it out, can start hate drafting. But if you're hate drafting to not give them their piece, you still got to take that piece. So you're almost doing it at the expense of you. It's a piece. It's not like I'm drafting something to my hand that I'm just holding on to and never using like you can do at other games. And this one, you're taking that piece and now you got to put on your board. So if you're doing it to spite them, well, it may hurt you as well because it may not fit perfectly, right? It's not, you can do that, but you may not do that well. You may lose, right? I love the fact that it is so light, because when Liz and I played the other day, we haven't talked hardcore strategy, but the biggest strategy I will tell people is if you can get your button economy going, i.e. the pieces you play on your board have buttons on them, that's the number one thing you need to try to do. So Elizabeth, I didn't pay attention to how many buttons she was getting to like the third or fourth time she passed it. And I'm like, you're getting 13 buttons? And I'm getting, by the end of the game, I was getting 6 buttons. 6. And I got blitzed. She was like 32 to minus 11 or something. It was the worst game I'd ever played of Patchwork. Now the next game I did win, but it was like 29 to 26 or something like that. But the best I ever had, I only had 3 empty spots in the entire board. I almost filled up my entire board for that. So, but yeah, you are correct in that this is very much a casual game. It's a lightweight game. It's a fun one. I equate it in a different way too, and I don't know if we may have talked about it as just games we played lately. Lost Cities. Have you ever played Lost Cities?
Yeah, for sure.
Totally different game, but easy, lightweight 2-player game that you can just play, and then you can just play, and then you can just play. We found Lost Cities really early, so we played Lost Cities a lot. But if Patchwork had been in there, it could have got played easily as well, a lot as well, because it plays so fast, and you have the fun of trying to put this together. Elizabeth's a puzzler by default, and so we like the challenge of what kind of puzzle we can make in there. And yeah, I'm scrolling very quickly through the top 100, and of games I've noticed that are 2-player only, so far it's Seven Wonders Duel, and then Patchwork. Well, right behind Patchwork is actually Splendor Duel, which is a newer game, but yeah, that's how much it's revered in the gaming world for such a light game. To me, I can't emphasize enough how great that is for such an easy to play, lightweight game to still be revered so highly in the hardcore gaming world. Says a lot about it.
Yeah. The last thing that I'll say before diving into cookie scale, unless you've got something else you want to kind of talk about, Jason, is and I'll mention price as well. So it's $28 on Amazon, which for the production and a 2-player version, once again, on the lighter side, this is one that if you play it and you love it, like you will get that $28 so fast, because you are going to play this so much that the tiles are probably going to like start crumbling a little bit. All polyomino games that I've ever played always seem to have a pretty high production value, just because you are handling the pieces so much that the cost is always going to be a little higher on them, because it's unlike a food token that you're going to have in another game where, okay, it's kind of crumbly, but I can still see and tell it's a meat. Sick. Like the polyomino pieces, if they start getting crumbly, it becomes difficult to actually use them on the board. So that production has to be high. But for polyomino games, and really where this game rested for me, is because polyomino games are so kind of unique compared to a lot of other mechanisms, I found myself in prepping for this episode just thinking about it in comparison to a lot of other polyomino games. And I'll say that is going to have an effect on my cookie rating. And I'm not entirely sure if that's fair or not. So I wanted to like throw that to you, Jason, and like see if you have like a similar vibe or how it, I just wanted to show my honesty to the listeners that I love polyomino games, and I just can't seem to separate this game from the rest of the other polyomino games as I prepped for this.
Yeah, I think you're right for saying it that way. And it's a tough thing. Like, I mean, I have this, we've talked offline about it. I've had the same debate on, like, do we only highlight games we absolutely love and think are the greatest game ever? Well, no, we wouldn't really be doing service to the board gaming community, because we're trying to find games that could be right for you, for those who are listening right now. Like, and I'm not trying to, I'm kind of burying the lead there. I'm not trying to like give away scores or anything, because I don't think they'll be terrible. But like, I agree. I love polyomino games. Absolutely love polyomino games. We've played a few. I mean, you and I have played at least 4 together between Planet Unknown and New York Zoo and Cartographers and this, maybe more. But we played 4 for sure. And there's other ones out there. And I absolutely love polyomino games. So it's easy to get distracted by those things in my mind when I think about trying to not compare them to them. But it's for my own gaming level, where I went at now, and I think I say this too often, but like, I have a bunch of games, so it's harder for things to be super highly rated, at least from the cookie rating, for a game for me when I have so many similar games that fill that need, right? And I like to say this, if I'd had this, I already kind of said earlier, we found Lost Cities early, and that it just clicked very, very hard for us. Like, if I pulled out Lost Cities, you'd be like, holy crap, the cards are so worn out, to your point about the polyomino pieces. Like, we've handled those cards in Lost Cities so many times, and we played. We'll play a game, and then play a game, and then play a game, and then play a game. Patchwork could be that game for you if you like the polyomino games and you want that quick, snappy game, for sure. We had other games that filled that need for us. When it comes to polyomino stuff, I may go for something heavier like Cartographers, which isn't that much more heavy. And we even debated that it's a good chance that will eventually be a feature game on Bards, because it takes the next level up, because we're all drawing the same thing versus different things. We have other scoring mechanisms. We debated about that. We debated about New York Zoo being our first polyomino game, because it's a polyomino game that we both like a lot. But I think we did the right thing by talking about Patchwork first, because our podcast is very much for newer and beginner players. And I don't want to, I'm the kind of guy, if I listen to somebody talk about it, I'm like, I want to get that game, even don't know anything about it. And we don't want to put anybody down the wrong path to buy a game that's not right for them, without doubt. You don't have to buy any of these games. Let's be clear. We're not telling you to go buy games. We're talking about games, and maybe you'll find something you like, right? We want you to find a game you like to play. And if none of these sound good, it's okay, because we're all different gamers. So we're not telling you to buy anything. Let's be clear about that. Jamie Stegmaier pushes that hard, and I'm the same way. He releases a new game. He'll be like, hey, you don't have to buy this game. I'm glad you're excited about it, but you have no obligation. If you don't want to buy any of my games, that's okay. Just come hang out and talk about games. I appreciate that. And that's us here. That's a long way of saying I'm glad we did this first, because I think you kind of pushed me to do this. I'm glad we did, because this is the right game to introduce to our audience of newer gamers the concept of polyomino games at a deep level, right? I think Patchwork is a great, great, great introduction to the polyomino world, for sure, without doubt. 10 years ago, we're first getting into gaming, we would love Patchwork, and our pieces would be worn out because we're getting them and moved them and shuffle them and getting them and moved them and shuffle them, right? And put them together and take them apart. But for me today, because I have those other games I've mentioned, I pulled this out. I'm the one I think recommended that you and I maybe think about this or and do it and play it. For me, my rating is a peanut butter cookie, right in the middle, right? It's a peanut butter cookie. So because it's a good game, easy to play, I will happily always play it, but I don't think I would ever pull this game out to play it. Honestly, now that Splendor Duel is here, if I wanted a lightweight 2-player game for somebody, that would be in there. A brand new player who wants to play a lightweight 2-player game, it could possibly be Patchwork. But Elizabeth and I will rarely ever just pull this out to get a polyomino fix. We'll play Cartographers or we'll play New York Zoo or something like that to get our polyomino fix. So mine is a peanut butter cookie. They're just fine. It could be great for you if you want to get into that polyomino world. But for me, it's just a peanut butter cookie.
Yeah. I'm happy to hear confirmation thoughts and all that, because I agree with Jason. And that when we brought this up, it's like it's almost like we don't want to give any review, any game like a low rating. Like when we give it a peanut butter cookie, it's like, oh man, like, okay. Like that almost feels like maybe we have not done that because it's how do we honestly tell you like, hey, this is amazing. And for me as a polyomino lover, this is like Blockus. Why I played Blockus in preparation was I had played Patchwork and I was like, let me go back to the game that made me fall in love with the genre just to see how does it stick in comparison. And Blockus is more crunchy than Patchwork is, like for sure. And so if I were to say like an introduction into polyomino, now that I know Patchwork exists, I think Patchwork is a better introduction. But for me, unfortunately, I think it has to be our first oatmeal raisin of the podcast for me. And here's my comparison, because I really I was so nervous to even see Jason's reaction because we don't share our ratings before we share these. And so there's a couple things that about why it lands at an oatmeal raisin for me. And it's because I think if you are into you love polyomino, there are so many aspects of this that almost feel like they've learned from Patchwork to make things shine. And so it's like it takes you other levels. But my biggest hang up on Patchwork is that the beauty of polyomino games to me is filling the board, getting the pieces to all line up and getting that completionist aspect. Watching the puzzle pieces fall into place is so incredibly satisfying. And for Patchwork, the buttons mean everything. Yes, you need to fill your board. Yes, you need to do this. But honestly, even if it looks so aesthetically bad, which as a polyomino lover just drives me crazy. Maybe I feel like I have like an OCD tendency when it comes to this. I don't know. But knowing that like, if I buy this piece that helps me fill the board traditionally, that's going to be worth it. That's going to be incredible. You can go to a New York Zoo where you can get the bigger pieces. The drawback is the bigger pieces, while they fill up the board more, they're harder habitats to fill for your animals. So there's an immediate drawback to this. Whereas the bigger pieces, all they do is keep you from getting negative points in Patchwork. And so because the buttons like drive everything, I almost more so go to Cartographers. Definitely is one we're going to have to cover, because while you're also trying to fill the board, there's the different environments and things that you're trying to build, which also help you with in-ground goals and things like that. And that's a fun spread to it. If you want to just fill your board and you want to have the connection in the puzzle of that, Blockus does fill that itch a little more, and is a 4-player version, but it also plays well at 2. I stand by that. I agree we should have done this episode A, we did it, but also like if you've never done polyomino, you could honestly just somewhat ignore the buttons as an in-game scoring. Like if you really wanted to modify your own thing and just have like all right, we're just going to go and fill our boards. Like that's going to be a thing. And it's another reason we'll do New York Zoo later on is because the win condition is so unique for a polyomino game. But it is so simple. It's so straightforward. And if you had a bad experience or you feel like, hey, I just got robbed, like I feel like I was playing the game really well, reset, play again. Because almost every other polyomino game I've ever played doesn't do that. Like Planet Unknown, my favorite polyomino game we've ever played.
Yep.
I could not play Planet Unknown back to back if you paid me. My brain would be fried.
Yeah.
So, Jason, is it too harsh? Is it what? How does the first oatmeal raisin getting thrown out? What are the feelings?
It's tough. I hope anybody doesn't think of that. We have a rating scale for a reason to give that perspective on there. We had to have an oatmeal raisin eventually, right? Because it's our first oatmeal raisin. Is that what you said? That's what I was trying to think when you said. I was like, I don't want it to be skewed to think, well, the game stinks and we hate it. Why'd you talk about it? Well, no. We explained to you why we talked about it, right? And hopefully that doesn't come across because it may sound perfect for a game like you. Like for example, if we reviewed Exploding Kittens, I can tell you now without ever playing it, it's no oatmeal raisin, 100%. Like because that kind of game will never be for me. I've done That's Not a Hat. While I see why everybody loves it, it may make peanut butter, right? It probably oatmeal raisin, right? Because it's not for me. That rating is specifically for me, and if I'm going to play it, right? So that's the best way I can say that. I don't think it's a bad thing, and by no stretch of imagination does it mean the game is bad. It's a fantastic game for sure, but with the advent, with the plethora of stuff of other games to play, your main gaming partner may be a lighter gamer, and this may be perfect for you and them, right? Because they don't want to have that hard crunchiness. Because Robbie's right, Planet Unknown is my favorite polyomino game, and it is hardcore crunchy, and I love it because of the variety of stuff on there. But there's so much stuff and so many options at the end of the game. Like, well, I played a game for sure. Like, I played a hardcore game that's gonna make my head hurt. So, no, I think it's fair. I think our assessments are definitely fair.
Yeah, and it like. Patchwork should scratch a lot. I struggled so hard with this episode, y'all. Like, I hope that my mental anguish is coming across in the episode for you, for the listeners, because Patchwork checks two boxes for me that in my current gaming life are necessary. It's lightweight and it's 2-player friendly. Like, because of that is who I am married to. That is who I have the opportunity to play the most games with. And like, for me to convince my wife to play Blockus is a challenge because it's going to be crunchy. It's going to have that. But if I really want to get a polyomino itch, we will own Patchwork because I can convince her to enjoy Patchwork and enjoy that ride. So even though I call it an oatmeal raisin, it's still in the collection. Like, it's going to be in the collection because it's an incredible game. And I can see why it jumped to one, like it's where it is on the overall list, which is impressive in itself. It just truly comes down to, if I'm really going to sit down and play a polyomino game, I feel like, okay, here are X number of reasons that I'm going to go another direction. And that, once again, doesn't make it bad, but just not for me personally. So, Jason, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, man, I think it was good. It was inevitable. It had to happen, like you said. So, and it's, I think it was a good discussion to try to explain those things, right? That way, if and when future lower ratings come out, it's not meant as a shot or anything like that, or a negative shot, rather. It's meant as an honest assessment for us. So I think we captured it well.
Yeah. And truly, my hope is when you get the lower ratings, it also makes the higher ratings mean more at the same time. So that way we're showing some honesty here, and that it's not like, oh, we're pulling out double doozies every week. Here we go. Like, oh, if they talk about the game, it's just automatic. Like, it's we aren't going to talk about a bad game. Like, there will never be an episode that we both oatmeal raisin. That I can promise. Because if we felt that way, we wouldn't do the episode. So, hope you guys enjoy. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you have an incredible rest of your day, and we will see you guys in 2 weeks for episode number 23.